Disturbing Ways Normal People Died explores the unsettling truth that tragedy can strike in the most unexpected moments. These real, unusual endings remind us how fragile everyday life can be, revealing bizarre circumstances that turn ordinary situations into haunting stories that linger long after they're told. The 2013 sinkhole tragedy in Seffner, Florida, remains one of those unsettling events that forces people to think about how unpredictable the natural world can be, especially in places where the ground beneath our feet isn't as solid as we assume. When a sinkhole suddenly opened beneath the bedroom of 37-year-old Jeffrey Bush, the story immediately gripped national attention not because it was sensational, but because it felt almost unreal. A reminder that even in a normal suburban home, something extraordinary and catastrophic can happen in an instant. That night, the earth simply gave way without warning, swallowing an entire room and leaving his family in shock as they tried desperately to reach him. First responders arrived quickly, but even the professionals had to confront the frightening reality that the ground around the sinkhole was still actively shifting, unstable, and dangerous. The cavity beneath the house turned out to be enormous, deeper and wider than initially believed, and rescuers had to make the heartbreaking decision to pull back, not because they wanted to, but because the soil kept collapsing, and entering the hole would have put more lives at risk. The home was condemned almost immediately and eventually demolished, with the sinkhole later examined, stabilized, filled, and monitored for years. What made the event resonate so strongly across the country was that there had been no real warning signs, no cracks in the wall, no sagging floors, no strange noises, nothing that would have signaled the house sat above a hidden void carved slowly over time by Florida's porous limestone foundations. This is part of what makes Florida especially prone to sinkholes, its karst landscape, built on rock that dissolves as groundwater moves through it, can develop massive underground cavities that remain invisible until they suddenly collapse. The idea that such a void could silently form and then open without notice, especially in the middle of the night, was both a scientific point of interest and a human tragedy. Over time, the site became a sort of somber landmark, not in a sensational way, but as a place that reminded locals and experts just how complex and vulnerable the state's geology really is. Years later, the sinkhole reopened briefly, thankfully, without harming anyone, but it underscored that these events are not one-time anomalies. They're part of Florida's natural processes, rare but entirely possible. For geologists, the incident prompted conversations about better monitoring, improved surveying, and public awareness about the warning signs of sinkhole activity, though even experts acknowledge that some sinkholes, especially those that open suddenly, remain nearly impossible to predict with current technology. For the family and community, the event was a profound loss, something that couldn't be explained away by science alone. It illustrated how a geological event becomes a human story about fragility, unpredictability, and the limits of control. While the incident is sometimes referenced today in documentaries or news summaries as an example of nature's startling power, it's remembered most as a deeply tragic moment for a family who did nothing wrong, experienced no warnings, and suffered consequences that were as sudden as they were devastating. Ultimately, the Seffner sinkhole stands as one of those rare events where science, nature, and human life intersect in a way that leaves a lasting impact, prompting not just curiosity about how such things happen, but empathy for those whose lives were forever changed in the few seconds it took for the earth to open beneath a quiet Florida home. In August 1986, the world witnessed one of the most unusual and quietly devastating natural disasters in modern history, when Lake Nyos, a seemingly peaceful crater lake tucked into the hills of northwestern Cameroon, suddenly released a massive cloud of carbon dioxide that swept silently across nearby villages and claimed more than 1,700 lives in a single night. What made this tragedy so chilling was not fire, explosions, or any dramatic spectacle. It was the total absence of warning. The lake appeared calm, the evening was ordinary, and people settled into their nightly routines unaware that enormous amounts of carbon dioxide had been dissolving into the deep, cold layers of water for years. This hidden buildup created a dangerous reservoir of gas that behaved like a tightly sealed bottle under pressure. Scientists believe that a natural disturbance, such as a landslide or a minor geological shift, caused the gas-saturated water from the depths to rush upward. As the water rose toward the surface where pressure was lower, the dissolved carbon dioxide escaped all at once in a violent but invisible burst known as a limnic eruption. The released gas did not drift harmlessly into the sky. Instead, it moved outward along the ground in a dense cloud. Because carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen, the gas flowed into valleys and villages with silent speed, displacing breathable air and suffocating everything in its path. People and animals collapsed instantly, many in their sleep and others while going about their usual routines. Survivors later described waking to scenes that were difficult to comprehend. Entire families remained motionless in their homes. Livestock lay scattered across fields. The air carried an eerie stillness that felt almost unreal because there had been no sounds of panic or struggle. For many who lived through it, the mystery of the event deepened the emotional impact. They did not understand how the night had transformed into a landscape of stillness. Scientists arriving at the scene were stunned by the scale and unusual nature of the disaster. At the time, limnic eruptions were not well understood and were considered extremely rare. Lake Nyos quickly became a focus of international attention as researchers tried to understand what had happened and how to prevent a similar catastrophe. The tragedy also brought global awareness to the risks hidden within certain volcanic lakes, revealing a natural hazard that had previously received little study. In the years that followed, researchers and engineers worked to design solutions that would prevent another buildup of gas in the lake. Their efforts resulted in the installation of tall vertical pipes capable of pumping gas-rich water from the depths to the surface in a controlled manner. The system worked like a continuous release valve, gradually venting carbon dioxide in a predictable way. This project represented a significant step in disaster prevention and showed how scientific understanding could turn a mysterious tragedy into a manageable risk. Lake Nyos also inspired new research into other lakes with similar geological characteristics, including Lake Monoon, which had experienced a smaller but similar gas release 2 years earlier. Today, Lake Nyos stands as both a warning and a lesson. It is a reminder that even serene landscapes can conceal immense natural forces, and that attention to hidden environmental processes is essential for protecting communities. The event remains a profound example of how the planet can reveal unexpected dangers, and how human resilience and scientific progress work together to learn from the past and build a safer future. On an otherwise ordinary winter afternoon in January 1919, Boston's North End was abruptly transformed by one of the strangest and most tragic industrial disasters in American history, forever remembered as the Boston Molasses Flood. At the center of the catastrophe stood a massive steel storage tank owned by the Purity Distilling Company, a towering structure that had been leaking for months and groaning under pressure every time it was filled. On January 15th, without warning, the weakened tank finally gave way with a deafening crack that echoed through the neighborhood as if the city itself had split open. More than 2 million gallons of warm molasses burst out in a violent surge, forming a dark, rolling wave that witnesses described as a moving wall of syrup taller than a 2-story home, and rushing with a speed no one imagined molasses could reach. The surge tore through the streets at an estimated 35 miles per hour, fast enough to flatten buildings, rip apart supports, and trap anyone unlucky enough to be in its path before they could even react. People were swept off their feet, horses and carts were overturned, and the sticky flood poured into homes, storefronts, and alleyways with a force as relentless as any natural disaster. As the molasses spread, the cold January air caused it to thicken rapidly into a heavy, suffocating mass that made rescue efforts painfully slow. Firefighters, police officers, sailors from a nearby ship, and volunteers from around the city rushed to help, wading through the sticky mire and pulling out survivors with great difficulty. The thickening syrup clung to everything and made every movement exhausting, and many rescuers later said it felt like trying to walk through cement that refused to let go. By the time the immediate danger had passed, 21 people had lost their lives, and around 150 had been injured, while countless horses and other animals perished in the mess. Cleanup efforts stretched on for weeks as workers used saltwater pumps, shovels, and hoses, blasting seawater to break apart and wash away the hardened molasses, which coated streets, buildings, and debris in a stubborn, sugary layer. Even after the visible mess was removed, the scent lingered for months, and some longtime residents later claimed that on hot summer days the neighborhood still carried a faint, sugary sweetness that reminded them of the terrible event. In the months that followed, investigators uncovered a troubling story of negligence. The tank had been constructed with low-grade steel that was too thin to withstand the pressure of the liquid it held, and it had never been properly inspected or tested before being put into use. At one point, it had leaked so badly that the company chose to paint it a dark color to make the escaping molasses less noticeable rather than fix the problem. The disaster led to a major class action lawsuit that placed responsibility on the company for its failure to maintain safe equipment, and the outcome helped shape future standards for construction, engineering, and safety regulations throughout the United States. Today, the Boston molasses flood stands as both a bizarre historical curiosity and a sobering lesson in the real-world cost of cutting corners. It reminds us that even something as seemingly harmless as a storage tank of sweet syrup can become deadly when oversight is ignored, and that behind every odd story in history are real lives changed forever. At the Pangyo Techno Valley Festival in 2014, the day began with an atmosphere of uncomplicated excitement as students, office workers, and fans gathered for a free outdoor concert that promised a pleasant break from routine. The performance area was lively, the weather was cooperative, and the energy of the crowd rose steadily as more people arrived to watch their favorite artists. In the middle of this cheerful scene stood a large metal ventilation grate that seemed like a harmless part of the urban setting and an appealing spot for anyone hoping to improve their view. People stepped onto it naturally, unaware that it concealed a deep drop into an underground parking facility. No visible signs warned them away, and no staff members considered the possibility that the grate might not support the growing cluster of spectators. The crowd laughed, talked, and angled their phones to capture the stage while the grate silently endured a weight it was never engineered to withstand. When it finally gave way, it did so without hesitation, sending those standing on it plunging downward and freezing the rest of the audience in shock as the music halted and the festival instantly shifted from celebration to catastrophe. Emergency responders rushed to the scene with urgency as the magnitude of the event became clear to everyone present. The ventilation shaft was narrow and deep, making rescue efforts extremely challenging, and the people who had fallen were gravely injured by the impact as well as by the debris that followed them down. Bystanders attempted to help however they could, calling for assistance and trying to keep the area clear, while officials worked quickly to assess the situation. News outlets were alerted almost immediately, and within minutes the tragedy became a national shock, prompting difficult conversations about event safety and the responsibilities of organizers. Investigators soon discovered that the grate, though solid in appearance, had been designed only to support its own frame and occasional maintenance access, rather than the combined weight of dozens of spectators. The realization that such an avoidable weakness had been overlooked created a wave of public anger, particularly among families of the victims who were left grieving losses that felt painfully senseless. As details emerged, the focus shifted to the chain of decisions that allowed the hazard to remain unnoticed, including assumptions made during planning and the absence of clearly defined safety protocols for crowd control in a busy and dynamic setting. Over time, the memory of the incident has continued to influence how public events are organized throughout South Korea, serving as a lasting reminder of the importance of vigilance in situations where large groups gather with an expectation of safety. Authorities introduced stricter guidelines for inspections and required organizers to demonstrate a stronger understanding of the structural features of their venues, even those that might seem insignificant at first glance. The event soon entered national conversations about responsibility and smarter management of crowded public spaces across communities. The incident also encouraged more open communication between organizers and municipal agencies so that potential risks could be identified earlier and corrected before crowds arrived. For many people, the tragedy is remembered not only for its immediate impact, but also for the sense of collective responsibility it inspired in the years that followed. It stands as a powerful illustration of how everyday infrastructure can become dangerous when assumptions replace careful evaluation, and how communities can learn and adapt when confronted with evidence that established habits and norms need improvement. The story of Pangyo remains a sobering testament to the value of preparation and the ongoing effort to protect lives. The story of Brandon Lee's death on the set of The Crow remains one of Hollywood's most unsettling reminders of how routine decisions can lead to irreversible consequences when safety is not given the respect it deserves. In 1993, Lee was poised for a major breakthrough, stepping confidently into his first leading role and carrying the momentum of a career that was beginning to take shape. As the son of Bruce Lee, he was no stranger to public attention, yet he was determined to establish himself through his own talent and dedication. The production of The Crow was built around a dark and atmospheric world, full of rain-soaked streets, emotionally driven action, and themes of love, loss, and justice. These themes later took on an unintended and haunting significance after the events of March 31st. During what should have been a carefully controlled scene, a prop firearm that was intended to fire blanks instead discharged a real projectile. The cause was a sequence of preventable errors involving improperly made dummy rounds that had been used earlier for close-up shots. These rounds still contained active primers, which generated enough force during a test to dislodge a bullet into the barrel. When blanks were loaded later that day, the gas pressure from the blank propelled the lodged bullet forward with lethal force, striking Lee in the abdomen. Despite immediate medical attention and lengthy emergency surgery, Lee died that evening at the age of 28. The tragedy was not only devastating, but deeply frustrating because so many of the contributing factors were tied to rushed decisions, budget concerns, and a production culture that had grown accustomed to bending safety guidelines. The crew had been working long hours under intense pressure, and several experienced weapons specialists had either been replaced or were not present when they were needed most. The investigation that followed forced the film industry to confront a wide range of systemic safety issues. Firearms had often been handled casually or entrusted to individuals without the necessary training. The incident exposed how fatigue, miscommunication, and cost-cutting measures can combine into a silent threat long before anyone realizes the danger. As a result, the industry began adopting stricter procedures for handling weapons on set, including better oversight, clearer chains of responsibility, and more rigorous standards for prop preparation and storage. Although the lessons were clear, later incidents have shown that the battle for consistent and reliable safety practices is ongoing. Beyond technical explanations and official reports, the human impact of Lee's death remains the most powerful element of the story. Friends, family, and colleagues remembered him as warm, focused, and generous, with a sense of excitement about his future that made his loss feel especially profound. His fiancée, Eliza Hutton, his mother, Linda Lee Cadwell, and the cast and crew lived with a grief that no investigation could fully resolve. When The Crow was eventually released, it became an unintentional tribute to Lee's talent, and audiences who watch it today often feel a mixture of admiration and sadness. His performance carries both the promise of a rising career and the weight of a life cut short. The tragedy continues to stand as a solemn reminder that the people who bring stories to life on screen deserve unwavering protection, and that even small oversights can have consequences that last for generations.